The following program has been made possible in part by a grant from the Alberto Culver Company. Since 1965, the Lincoln Academy of Illinois has brought together a distinguished group of business, labor, educational, cultural, and community leaders. Their purpose has been to recognize those singular individuals whose lives have brought honor to Illinois in the spirit of its most famous son, Abraham Lincoln.
They've exhibited his leadership ability. Many of them have that great quality of articulation, and they have the compassion for people that he had. The fact that we can grow some of the best crops in the world, we also can grow some of the best people.
I think the Lincoln Academy gives Illinois an opportunity to feel good about itself because of the quality of the people that have called Illinois their home. I mean, it's a very distinguished group of people that have been selected over the years, people who have contributed not just here in Illinois, but throughout the nation and throughout the world.
Each year, laureates are inducted into the Lincoln Academy in a formal convocation ceremony. They are presented by the governor with the Order of Lincoln Medallion, the state's highest honor for individual achievement. Its colors of red, violet, and green symbolize the state bird, the cardinal, the state flower, the violet, and the leaves of the state tree, the oak. Patterned upon the learned academies of Europe, the nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization is unique among the 50 states. Laureates are chosen for excellence in their profession and for their service to humanity.
These are people that have been successful in their own field, but what have they done with their success to help others? And that is a key element to our selection.
Whether it's through charitable involvement or just being involved one-on-one. These are people who have made a difference in millions of lives here in Illinois and throughout the nation.
The Lincoln Academy also recognizes outstanding senior students at each of Illinois' four-year colleges and universities in ceremonies held each fall at the Illinois State Capitol, and has organized a Hall of Fame of historic Illinoisans who lived prior to the founding of the Academy, including Abraham Lincoln. Honored as laureates of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois in ceremonies at the James R. Thompson Center in Chicago, an early leader in the war on drugs, a renowned artist and educator, a respected historian of religion and author, an insurance industry leader and dedicated philanthropist, a soldier honored for service in battle and diplomacy, and a public servant committed to helping others.
The new laureates have been selected by a process that started earlier this past year. And they were picked by the officers, regents, and trustees, that number 60, appointed by the governor. The 6 that we selected in November are to be honored by the state of Illinois and decorated with the Order of the Lincoln by the governor, who also serves as president of the Academy. I now ask that Michael Scully, a general trustee of the Academy, read the citation for Laureate Peter Bensinger.
Born in Chicago, Peter Benjamin Bensinger is a recognized authority on law enforcement, criminal justice, and drug policy, whose commitment to public health and safety inspired him to pioneer the concept of the drug-free workplace. Mr. Bensinger was appointed administrator for the United States Drug Enforcement Administration by President Ford in 1976, a post that he held until 1981, serving under Presidents Carter and Reagan. During his tenure as head of the DEA, the agency responsible for investigating illegal drug trafficking, heroin imports declined 40%, and heroin deaths fell by more than one-half. Mr. Bensinger has lectured widely in this country and overseas on drug-related issues. He is committed to the drug-free workplace, a concept that he developed and has promoted with his consulting firm, Bensinger, DuPont and Associates. Governor Edgar, it is my privilege to present to you as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois, Mr. Peter Benjamin Bensinger.
Peter Bensinger's interest in public service and social concerns began early as he watched his mother's many charitable works in Chicago.
When I went away to school, I went to a preparatory school, which did have a big impact on me, and I'm grateful to that school, Phillips Exeter Academy. I got involved in some service work and continued to do that at Yale University, starting to work with people that were handicapped with cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy. I felt good about that activity, and it probably set a pattern for me to be aware of a larger community around me and around where I was living.
Governor Richard Ogilvy's election in 1968 called Bensinger away from his family business, the Brunswick Corporation.
He was the best CEO I've ever worked for, and that includes lots of presidents and attorney generals, but he was very clear in his direction. He delegated authority effectively. He held people accountable, but he also gave them backing and encouragement, and it was exciting. In the corrections field and the public safety field, we were coming out of the dark ages, really.
Bensinger rose from administrative assistant in the State Department of Public Safety to director of the Illinois Department of Corrections in 1970. There, he set about reforming a prison system as antiquated as its many 19th century buildings.
We changed 59 laws. We started Sunday visits. Obviously, that's when families of offenders have the best opportunity to come and visit. We opened up the letter writing. We established grievance procedures. We promoted major changes in salaries for the correctional officers, brought in universities, had a full-time pardon and parole board, established a unified code of corrections. Dick Ogilvy was one of the leading governors in the country to spearhead correctional reform and received recognition for it.
Bensinger fought prison drug problems by starting rehabilitation programs. He targeted drug trafficking in his next post as head of the Chicago Crime Commission before taking over as administrator of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency in 1976. He was its third director in 3 years.
At DEA, I found an agency, an organization that was somewhat demoralized, whose mission was challenged by some that didn't know whether we should in fact have strong drug laws, and by a Congress and media that needed to be educated, and that we needed to tell people what our problems were. And we changed laws, we increased our budget, we got better support, and we had a real sense of comradeship between the administration, first the Ford administration and then Carter administration, and the Congress. And that was a good thing to do. The politics was to confront the problem and recognizing that it's not going to be solved like a next day challenge. It's not like a football game. It's not even like a world war, which you have a beginning and a middle and an end. This is a continuing battle. And our objective is to curb drug abuse, to reduce the exposure of the American people to the violence associated with it and the addiction, not to sense that, well, we're going to cure it tomorrow. And that's the challenge that you have as an administrator of that agency, and to get the state and local people to work with you.
Bensinger found many allies in the war on drugs and forged international partnerships to fight trafficking. He achieved major cuts in heroin by the time he stepped down in 1981.
I think the overdose death rate was running about 2,000 a year. The tonnage of imports was about 6 or 7 tons, and that dropped to an overdose death rate of less than 800, and imports of perhaps 1.5 tons. The number of addicts was cut by 40 to 50%. We established much better cooperation with state and local law enforcement and international cooperation.
Returning to private life, Bensinger put his experience to work developing the concept of the drug-free workplace to promote health and safety. He pioneered employee assistance programs through his company, Bensinger, DuPont and Associates.
I sometimes get asked, well, what I do on my own time on a weekend is my business. I don't care what you do on your weekend until it affects me. And if you use marijuana on a weekend, you're bringing 421 chemicals to work on Monday. The single biggest asset of any organization is its people. And that's what a good drug and alcohol policy will protect, that asset. It's the people that are involved, the men and women in the organization. And providing an opportunity for rehabilitation makes sense. It's good business, and it's not only good for humanity, but it'll help that individual and their family. And what more can be done is to recognize that this is society's problem. And the police alone are not going to solve it. It's going to take ministers, it's going to take coaches, it's going to take teachers, it's going to take parents, it's going to take students, it's going to take employers, labor unions, community organizations, everyone, to recognize the drugs are unhealthy, they're unsafe, and they change behavior.
I've been fortunate to have worked with thousands of dedicated men and women in law enforcement, in corrections, in treatment and rehabilitation, and victim and employee assistance. They truly deserve our full support, your full support and thanks for their commitment to fields of endeavor for which there is faint praise, sparse economic reward, great personal danger, and little recognition. I accept this honor with and for them.
Born in Decatur, Illinois, Preston Jackson is an artist and teacher dedicated to nurturing the talents of his students, inspiring those who view his art, and encouraging all to see what he calls the wonderful similarities of all mankind. His teaching career has taken him from Millikan University in the art department at Western Illinois, and from there to chair the sculpture department at the acclaimed School of the Art Institute of Chicago. But his influence as an educator extends well beyond the classroom. He has conducted workshops for promising artists of all ages, collaborated with other artists in creating educational videos, and opened his gallery and his heart to minority and troubled teens particularly. In art, word, and deed, Preston Jackson demonstrates that one man can make a difference. Governor Edgar, it is my privilege to present to you, as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois, Mr. Preston Jackson.
This is Willie. He goes by the name of Willie. And the sad thing about it, you know, he's homeless. Willie has this ability to adorn his body, to decorate his body with just about anything he could find. I think, in a sense, this is a true artist performance, you know. Art tells us how human we are. It tells us what being human is like. The fact that we all experience the same emotions, the same similar responses to everything. We're from some place, homes, families, our opinions are fabricated, are formed in those kinds of structures. So I think that making art myself seems to get a little bit closer to that source. You know, it helps to explain life, who we are, where we are, where we've come from, the mistakes we've made, and how we can make life better.
Preston Jackson began making art as a child in Decatur, a child whose imagination was inspired by the cartoons he saw in the Sunday paper. He was encouraged by family and special teachers to draw and challenge the conventional wisdom that young African-American men don't make a career in the arts.
I've always wanted to be able to sit down and paint a landscape and really feel it. I've always wanted to paint cityscapes, subjects that were a little more optimistic, or a little bit more pleasing and beautiful, you know, but I've never been able to do that, you know, and unfortunately, because of my sensitivity, I guess, I'm so plugged in to things that are going on, and especially during that time, it sort of set the stage. I mean, if things were better, then my art would reflect that, but unfortunately it's not. There's this fight between good and evil, sometimes shielded by a beautiful outer structure that is a general statement, a total statement, until you really analyze what it is, what it's doing, the concept behind it, and then it reveals its true self. And that always happens in my art.
Jackson's Hainson history ship on Chicago's Navy Pier is packed with symbolism as it teaches about slavery, immigration, and the Holocaust.
There are many different ships in one. It changes faces. It changes faces simply because when the individual is looking at it, they move slightly, it becomes something else. It even takes you into inside the skeletal structure, and you see these little rooms that are underneath the deck. And so it's like a vessel that carries dreams, ideas, forcibly and not so forcibly. There's the Mersey, which was an Irish ship that brought the Irish over here during the potato famine and what they had to endure. And then there's the SS St. Louis, the Jewish ship. Well, it wasn't a Jewish ship, but they brought Jews over here seeking asylum and later to return back to Germany, where many of them were put to death. So this is a teaching vessel that tells us never to forget these things.
Other lessons are torn from today's headlines, like the senseless tragedy of a drive-by shooting.
It's like a brainless act, you know, and not only does his hat fly off, but the top of his head sort of flies off as he fires his gun. And very overweight, I mean, because he probably sits at home and just watches television or movies, you know, and so I'm trying to show that, you know, inactivity of the body, of the mind, you know, produces something that takes this shape where it becomes a predator-like thing that just fires guns at people, you know.
Jackson also teaches by celebrating the richness of African American life and culture. His ever-growing series, From Bronzeville to Harlem, is alive with everyone from families to the famous, like entertainer Florence Mills.
I think that the African American Renaissance period was something much better than what's happening today. I just feel that because we were more unified. And this piece is to teach a lesson, to tell us that we can get back to that or go further or get past all of this crime and get back to basic learning and pride and developing ourselves, you know, in a very strong and cultural way.
Jackson loves teaching others about art, from heading the sculpture department at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to teaching school kids at his Checkered Raven studio in Peoria.
I guess I'm infatuated by the fact that you can see, feel, hear, sense, watch them grow. You can see them. I mean, you know, you can talk to a child, and then you come back later, and you know they've grasped that concept, and they sort of spit it out, or in words, or either in some type of performance. And that's the delight, you know. I enjoy seeing that happen. It's those things that you can't touch, you know, but you know that you've constructed something in the mind of another person.
In a society where there's war, poverty, bigotry, these things still exist. I feel that my purpose as an artist and as a teacher must be, to some degree, an attempt to alleviate the suffering of those that are affected by these social ills. I have tried to focus on saving our children and by telling our history through my artwork, as well as directly affecting them. Whatever I've achieved in my life, I could not have done it without the support of my parents and my immediate family, my wife, Melba, and my daughters, Natalie and Alice. I also owe a debt of gratitude to the numerous friends and supporters who have aided me in so many ways. I'd like to thank and acknowledge my good friend, Mrs. Jane Borland. Thank you so much for what you've done for me. Okay? Thank you.
Born in Nebraska, Martin E. Marty recently retired from the University of Chicago Divinity School as a gifted teacher, extraordinarily prolific author, and one of America's foremost scholars of religion. In 1963, he joined the faculty of the university's Divinity School. The first of his many books appeared in 1959, and since then, rarely a year has passed without a new one. He has also written thousands of articles, columns, and book reviews, as well as editing the weekly Christian Century since 1956, and his own biweekly newsletter, Context. At the University of Chicago, Professor Marty inspired countless students and nurtured a generation of young scholars. But his influence extended far beyond the classroom into the public arena. He helped found the Park Ridge Center for the Study of Health, Faith, and Ethics in 1985, and is the director of the Public Religion Project, which promotes the discussion of faith and religion in America. Governor Edgar, it is my pleasure to present Martin E. Marty as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois.
One side of my brain, I suppose, got programmed a little bit when I would see my father and mother would babysit me very often on a church pew while he's playing organ, she's in the choir. So I got a pretty heavy dose of it, and that normally leads to reaction. But I also saw generosity. I recall there were floods in Louisville, and in the midst of the Depression, I remember the minister holding up a plate full of dollar bills. We never saw dollar bills that these people were sharing. I think that touched me a lot.
A life in the ministry beckoned Martin Marty as a young seminarian, but his creation of a fictional theologian named Franz Biebfeldt inadvertently led to a life of scholarship at the University of Chicago.
We invented him as kind of a hoax on the faculty, and half the faculty caught on and thought it was funny, and the other half didn't catch on and didn't think it was funny. And instead of sending me off to London, where I was supposed to have been a minister to displaced persons after the war, they sent me to a parish in Illinois for seasoning, and that parish had that their assistants had to do doctoral work. That's how I stumbled into a life of scholarship.
Dozens of books and thousands of articles, reviews, and columns later, Marty's curiosity is still thriving.
Well, I start with history itself. I like to quote the great British economic historian R.H. Tawney, who said, "I find the world very odd, and I try to figure out how it got that way." I like to study the human comedy, the human tragedy, the accidents of history, and so on. But then you have to have a subject matter, and I got into the long pull history first of Christianity. I've been interested in all its ages. But in my doctoral work, I started concentrating on the modern, European, and American, and for 30 years now, I've been mainly an Americanist. I'm interested in pluralism. How do people get morals, values, ethics, and have faith in a society with so many, many, many religions? And my other interest is comparing experiences. I led a 6-year study, 5 volumes of comparing fundamentalisms around the world.
He considers his history of American religion, under God, indivisible, his life's work.
In America, the competitive principle is there, and you're all swimming or drowning. And I think that's one of the things that have been a great inventiveness. I think the mix of peoples, every new infusion of immigrants, bring along little bits of the religion they've known, and then they see new opportunity here, and if there's nothing here, something new gets invented for them. Both to meet our anxieties and to relish our opportunities, I think we've tended to reach for this rich cafeteria line offering of religions.
Marty's books, like this new series of meditations combined with photographs taken by one of his sons, continue to find new readers as part of today's renewed interest in religious subjects.
I like to quote a French philosopher, Merleau-Ponty, who says, "Because we are present to a world, we are condemned to meaning." We didn't ask to be here. It's fired point blank at us. There's only chaos unless somebody teaches us words, teaches us gestures, and so on. So I would say meaning searches are innate in us, but for most of us, the vast majority of humans, and far more in 1998, 99 than people thought 50 years ago, we do that through the myths, stories, symbols, rites, ceremonies that come with religion. There are always debates, is the human homo religiosus, that is innately religious? I don't know how you quite prove that. I would just say that while significant numbers of people seem to lead full lives without having worked this out, the vast majority, I'm going to say vast majority outside of Western Europe, which is the area where it seems to be least vivid, are somehow religious, yes.
The recipient of numerous honors, including the National Humanities Medal, Marty lives his calling beyond academe by founding centers for the understanding of faith and religion.
I do think that the Park Ridge Center, more than any other institution, has helped people bring together the serious questions of medical ethics with their faith. I do believe that the Public Religion Project is doing a great deal to help, as its charter is, to bring to light and interpret the forces of faith in American society. Nobody, I'm not messianic or whatever, nobody's going to turn everything around. I just think we all are given gifts to make little incremental differences in the world, and I think these do.
Marty plans several more books, including The Presence, a companion to The Cry of Absence, which chronicled the death of his first wife.
I'm interested in the ways in which serious people have their feet on the ground, people are true realists, have some sense that there's more to the story than just the atoms and the molecules and the neuron firings. I don't mean that in any ghostly sense, that you have somebody hovering in your room, but the more. It comes again when I hear the organ play, when I see a new birth, when I see the right drop of dew on a leaf in an early morning, when I see a smile on the face of a cancer patient. Something's going on there that I don't think you can just reduce and say this is nothing but a twitch of a muscle. Tonight, or any night in Illinois, or any week, over 50% of the citizens will have volunteered. 60 to 70%, if we're a good national sample, are doing that through religious institutions, or we'll tell you they're prompted mainly by the vision of the forces of faith. It's a great element in the life of this state, and I hope to be around a long time to keep chronicling it along the way. Like everyone else, I congratulate the fellow laureates and thank the Academy. We often say keep the faith. I thank spouse Harriet, who brings music into my life and helps me keep the faith. My pastor, the Reverend Dr. Linda Lee Nelson, is here, and we keep the faith together, and I hope we do it at the side of those quiet and unsung people who keep the faith. Thank you.
Born in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, Patrick G. Ryan is the talented chief executive of the global insurance company Aon Corporation, whose generous philanthropies helped make Chicago a better place to live. Mr. Ryan's first job after graduating from Northwestern University in 1959 was as an insurance salesman, and he has been in the insurance business ever since. In 1964, he founded the Ryan Insurance Group, which he merged with a combined international corporation in 1982. In a few short years, he transformed the company into an insurance powerhouse, renamed Aon Corporation in 1987. Praised as a pace-setter for the insurance industry, Mr. Ryan is equally noted for his civic leadership. Though he supports many worthwhile causes, the one closest to his heart is the Pathways Center for Children, a physical therapy clinic for children with physical challenges that offers postgraduate training to Chicago area pediatric therapists. This is an institution that he founded along with his wife, Shirley. In business and community service, Pat Ryan is a true leader. Governor Edgar, it is my privilege to present to you as laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois, Mr. Patrick G. Ryan.
Certainly team sports give you the ability to work with a team, to be a part of a team. And I found that no matter where you go in life, you always end up being a part of a team. And so I think learning early to function with a team and to be able to do that. I think learning from defeat was good. And part of my high school career, we had a lot of defeat, and I think that was good. Learning the pain of quitting and not wanting to repeat that was important.
Patrick Ryan learned sales as a student at Northwestern University. He sold memory books to his classmates, so many in fact, that he had to recruit a sales force and expanded the enterprise to other campuses.
Taught me that I could build a sales organization, so that was really important for my belief that I could be an entrepreneur and I could be successful. Secondly, it taught me the importance of selecting the right teammates, because I would get people on different campuses, and if I got the right people, it worked. If I got the wrong people, it didn't work. And it also taught me the importance of everybody having similar goals.
Ryan started team building right out of college, recruiting and training other like-minded young professionals in the insurance business. Insurance was a business that matched his drive to succeed.
The only limitations in insurance are self-imposed. You literally could take 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and find somebody to talk to sell insurance. And I liked that. I didn't want to have external inhibitions. I found this principle of multiplying yourself through others, getting others to be able to do what you could do. If you just do it yourself, then there's that inhibition. You're limited to how much you can do. If you can get a large number of other people to repeat what you do, and that's really the principle that I picked up, that caused the business to grow from a one-man operation to really an international business.
Ryan has used that philosophy to grow the Aon Group into the world's second largest broker of commercial insurance, with 40,000 employees in 110 countries. Aon is a Gaelic word meaning unity. It's a core value for a company that brings together a broad variety of resources for clients, like the state-of-the-art Catastrophe Information Center, to assist customers in natural disaster response planning.
In order to get people to sell something, they have to believe in it. And the belief is that you're providing something of real value to the individual, whether it's a life policy or a medical policy or an auto policy, a commercial policy to a business, that you're doing something that's important for that individual or for that organization. And I think most people want to do something that's socially redeeming. I mean, they want to have an important role in society. And insurance has that. In fact, in the commercial insurance business, which is our core business today, commerce doesn't exist anywhere in the world without insurance, because people won't invest, won't risk their capital unless they can protect it with insurance.
Ryan says he measures his success as a businessman by seeing his employees realize their potential. That includes serving the communities where they do business through efforts like Chicago Cares and raising funds for Chicago's Lyric Opera and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, among others.
One corporate responsibility is to keep creating jobs. I mean, I think one of the most important things for a business is to create jobs. But then it's also to be a real participant in the community, to be involved in community activities such as education, community activities such as creating jobs for those less fortunate. Frankly, making the community in which you do business a better place to live, a higher quality of life. Therefore, supporting the cultural activities of that community.
Ryan is devoted to Northwestern University, where he chairs the Board of Trustees and has led capital campaigns for a new basketball stadium and renovation of the football field that now bears his name. Among his many causes, the Pathway Center for Children, founded with wife
intervene early so that you can get rid of, in the very early formative stages, the physical or speech challenges, and then developing occupational therapy. It's worked extremely well. We work with 250 children a week, and the success stories are, they're feel-good stories.
For someone who's succeeded in so many different ways, Patrick Ryan's personal definition of success is quite simple.
Feeling good about yourself is the number one, I think, need every human being has. And having dignity, feeling, that's why I think a job is so important. So we try to get jobs for the homeless in a program we're working with now, because the dignity of having a job. So looking in the mirror, understanding what's looking back at you and liking it.
I've told my 3 sons that business can be a platform for helping mankind, creating jobs, influencing the ethical and moral behavior of business people, getting the capital to help out and contribute to support important needs. And I personally had the great opportunity to work in education, mostly higher education, but education with Northwestern as a trustee and now as chairman of the board. And great universities are really in perpetuity. So I feel very proud to have been able to do that. And then to work with my beautiful wife, Shirley, on the Pathways Center and the Pathways Awareness Center. It says in the Bible that to whom much is given, much is expected. And we all feel that way, and I thank the Academy for this award.
Born in Warsaw, Poland, on the eve of World War II, John Shaliikashvili experienced at first hand the hardships of war before his family immigrated to Peoria, Illinois in 1952. Commissioned as a second lieutenant of artillery, he rose through line and field officer grades, commanding artillery units and organizations, and demonstrating a capacity for quiet, effective leadership. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 1993 to 1997, General Shaliikashvili was praised by President Clinton as a soldier's soldier and a creative and flexible visionary who understood the complexities of international relations and conflicts in the post-Cold War world. It is my privilege, Governor Edgar, to present to you as a laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois, General John Shaliikashvili.
It was just the right place to start a new life. It's often said about the sense of values that you only have in a place like Middle America. And Peoria in the 1950s, early 1950s, was just that. And so whether you're talking about developing a sense of right or wrong or a sense of responsibility to the community and whatnot, you couldn't have picked a better place to grow up.
John Shaliikashvili believes the lessons he learned about the rights and responsibilities of being an American that he learned as a teenager in Peoria formed the foundation of his life, a life spent in service to his adoptive country. But Shaliikashvili didn't set out to be a soldier. He calls being drafted in 1958 a fortuitous accident.
I had finished Bradley, and I was about to go to work as a young design engineer when I received my draft notice. And so I don't know how to say it. I went very reluctantly, and I was convinced that I was going to put in my 2 years and return again. And well, obviously I did. I did not. 39 years later, I finally retired. But it wasn't something that immediately struck me as what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I went in as a soldier, eventually was went to OCS, Officer Candidate School, was commissioned. And my first tour as an officer was up in Alaska. And it is there that I really fell in love with that life. I could not have asked for a more versatile, exciting life. And what to me has always appealed so much is that, I guess like someone who teaches at a school, the soldiers always stay the same age. They're all in the 18, 19, 20-year-old category. And although you grow older, the people that you work with, the majority of the people you work with, always stay young. And that forces you to kind of stay young at heart.
Shaliikashvili earned the Bronze Star for his service in Vietnam, a war that divided his country and almost destroyed his beloved army.
I don't think it's overstating it when I said that it was destroying the army. By the time we got to the early 70s, the army was at as low a point as you ought to allow a military force to get. And many people were leaving in droves. And I don't think any one of us, my age then, who didn't go through a deep soul searching whether one ought to stay or just leave and leave that all behind. And fortunately, a number of us decided we're going to stay and see if we can do something about it. You really had to make fundamental changes in the way we thought of our military, the way we recruited, the way we trained, the way we organized and equipped ourselves. So one of the great lessons for us then was that if you're going to make a reform, it has to be an all-inclusive reform. Otherwise, you're not maximizing.
Operation Desert Storm proved that years of hard work had paid off with a military the general now calls the envy of the world. It's a world whose political realities shifted as Shaliikashvili worked his way through diplomatic and strategic posts to become Commander-in-Chief of U.S. forces in Europe and NATO Supreme Commander. In 1993, he was named Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff by President Clinton.
I thought that probably the most important function of the job of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs is to give the best possible military advice to the President, certainly to the Secretary of Defense and to the National Security Council. That, I think, I always thought as my highest responsibility. Second one is to do what a chairman needs to do to ensure that the military remains, in fact, that premier force. And that isn't just worrying, therefore, about today. You also have to force yourself to reserve enough time to think about 10, 20 years out, and what it is that you need to do today to ensure that 10, 20 years from now, the force is as good as it is today.
The end of the Cold War means new responsibilities for the world's remaining military superpower and a fundamental shift in its security policy.
Instead of deterrence, you have to have an engagement in the world, a sort of an engagement that shapes the environment out there so that the ethnic strives do not become crises and crises do not become regional wars that invariably draw us in.
Shaliikashvili promotes that view now as a visiting professor at Stanford University's Center for International Security and Arms Control.
I believe in it deeply. I believe in it deeply. And I think businessmen do it as they travel without knowing it. It is each one of us in its own way trying to ensure that we understand where the points of friction are and try to do something about it so it does not lead to conflict.
Where else but here can a youngster from Warsaw, Poland, be given such a great start on a new life and the opportunity to devote his adult life then in the service of this great nation. For 39 years, I've had the opportunity to work with and to lead those remarkable young men and women who wear America's uniform. And in fact, to rise through the ranks and eventually become Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the principal military advisor to the President of the United States. Where else? Where else but here in America? If I did anything in my life that merits this recognition, then surely it is much less a reflection on any of my accomplishments than it is a reflection on this very unique, this remarkable nation of boundless, boundless opportunity. And it is in that spirit that I thank you for this very great award. Thank you very much.
Born in Eugene, Oregon, Paul Simon is a lifelong public servant whose 43-year career in politics and government bears eloquent testimony to his personal integrity, breadth of vision, and political courage. Elected as a Democrat to the Illinois House of Representatives in 1954 and to the State Senate in 1962, Mr. Simon earned the Best Legislator Award 14 consecutive years from the Independent Voters of Illinois. Elected Lieutenant Governor in 1968, he worked to transform that office from a largely ceremonial post into that of an ombudsman devoted to making the state government work for the people. The public interest remained foremost in his mind during his 10 years of service in the United States House of Representatives, beginning in 1974, and in the United States Senate from 1984 until his retirement in January 1997. Senator Simon likes to remind us all that we can do better. Governor Edgar, it is my privilege to present to you as laureate of the Lincoln Academy of Illinois, a man who has given his very best to Illinois and her people, Mr. Paul Simon.
I grew up in a family where helping people was part of life, and also an interest in public affairs. My father was a Lutheran minister. February of 1942, the President of the United States ordered 120,000 Japanese Americans away from their homes, but not a one of those 120,000 people had committed a crime. My father stood up and said, "This is wrong." And I can remember the hate phone calls. It taught me a lesson: if you believe something, stand up for it, no matter what the odds are.
Paul Simon started taking unpopular, even dangerous stands of his own as a 19-year-old journalist. Simon revived the failing Troy Tribune to expose syndicate gambling in Madison County, Illinois, and launching his own political career at the age of 25.
People were afraid. And so I finally decided, well, I'm going to run for state representative just to show you can win without having the benediction of these underworld figures.
Simon found the State House had its own problems.
Corruption was very open and blatant, so much so that eventually I co-authored an article in Harper's Magazine called The Illinois Legislature Studying Corruption.
Simon's bills reflected his many interests, like laws creating the state's Open Meetings Act, the Illinois Arts Council, and more.
If your goal is to amass power, if your goal is to get credit, then you're not going to be that effective. But if you're willing to work on things that don't generate a lot of attention, like seeing to it that all young people with disabilities can get help by our public schools. That was a struggle to get that passed. We passed it in Illinois, and then I went to Washington, and we were able to pass it at the national level. But it is not the kind, it's one of the things I'm proudest of. I don't know that I've ever received 3 paragraphs in a story about that. It is not, it doesn't produce front page headlines.
As lieutenant governor, Simon worked to relieve racial tensions in Cairo in 1969. He mounted an unsuccessful bid to win his party's nod for the governor's mansion in 1972, but 2 years later, he ran for Congress from Southern Illinois and won.
The Washington scene gave me a chance to look at the international dimension of our problems and much more. Now, I continued. Every year I was in Springfield, I served in the Education Committee. Every year I was in Washington, either the House or the Senate. I served on the Education Committees. So I continued those interests. But it gave me a chance to broaden myself and to contribute in the international arena.
Simon held hundreds of town meetings to stay in touch with constituents and drafted important legislation on education, disability policy, and foreign affairs. Elected U.S. Senator in 1984, he championed the National Literacy Act, a student loan program, balancing the federal budget, and chairing the Senate Subcommittee on Africa.
If you can help Namibia, which most Americans have never heard of even, to get their struggling democracy going, that you get satisfaction out of doing that kind of thing.
I have come home today to Illinois, to my friends and neighbors, to declare that I am a candidate for President of the United States.
I would have faced our fiscal problems. I would have tried to address the problems of poverty in our country. I would have tried to move on some of the social problems that we have. And I think a president who provides leadership somewhat along the Harry Truman variety can do a great deal for this country.
Simon says he learned a tremendous amount during the campaign and put that knowledge to use in the remainder of his Senate career, a career he chose to end after 2 terms when he saw colleagues who stayed on too long.
Another factor was raising money for a campaign. My last campaign cost $8.4 million. And on a per vote basis for incumbent senators who had contests in 1990, for 32 or 33 of us, that was the 4th lowest expenditure.
Today, Simon continues authoring books and addressing issues like campaign spending, Social Security, and poverty through the Public Policy Institute he founded at Southern Illinois University.
What we're trying to do is to tackle the really tough issues and make a contribution. I thank the people of Illinois who've been so good to me to make possible whatever contributions I've been able to make. And in a kind of a peripheral way, it is good to be associated with Abraham Lincoln. I think his greatest speech was the second inaugural address, when we were still at war, the most bitter war this nation has ever known. And you would expect the president of one side, the leader of one side, to say, we're going to beat those so-and-sos. And instead, Abraham Lincoln said, with malice toward none, with charity to all. It was a generosity of spirit unlike any president we have ever had. I thank you again for this great honor, and I hope all of us can follow the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, not just the name of Abraham Lincoln. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to present the President of the Lincoln Academy, the Governor of Illinois, the Honorable Jim Edgar.
To paraphrase Lincoln, what transpires here tonight may be little noted nor long remembered, but we will long benefit from the sacrifices these 6 men have made and the work they have done. Illinois is a better state because they call Illinois home. We are a better people because of them. Men who have built our military might and defended our national shores. Men who have guarded our precious individual rights and freedoms. Illinoisans who strive to strengthen society by eradicating the scourge of drugs that can terrorize families and society apart. And who have succeeded in the global markets of the world, but who have shared their most valuable asset, their time, so that more children will have a chance to succeed. Individuals who have been given a talent for the arts and share their gifts with young minds and young hands, and who nurture our religious faith, reminding us that we accomplish little on our own. These are the kinds of men who have made Illinois great. Each of these men have made a priceless difference in our lives, and I thank each of them for that. Lincoln once said he had no ambition more important than to be judged worthy of his fellow man's esteem. We hope the achievements of Illinois and its people today would be judged worthy of his esteem. Thank you.